So welcome everybody to the second workshop, Modern and Contemporary Jewish Translation and Multilingualism, Practices, History and Semiotics. I will speak in English, even though it's not my preferred language, but I think it's a sort of lingua franca for all of us. I'm here, I'm Dr. Cynthia Gabbay, Maia Avruj, who has been assisting this project and workshop. She had gone through the all technical aspects of the workshop, and I would like to thank her as a first thing, because everything went as far very well. So thank you very much, Maia. As you see, the workshop is being recorded. If you do not want to be recorded, please close your camera and silence your microphone. For the speakers, if you do not wish to be recorded during your presentation, please let us know in advance. We're still entering people in the Zoom. I am very happy to see that you are coming from everybody worldwide. So I wish this encounter will be enriching. I will start to present the workshop. The framework of the workshop is my DFE project that started 3 years ago, titled The Jewish Library in Argentina, Carlos Moises Grünberg's Cosmopolitan Poetry and Polyglot Translation. Last year, we organized the first workshop, and it was at that time when we founded the Network for Jewish Translation Studies and Multilingualism in the modern and contemporary era. So this year we thought it would be interesting to see how many people would like to broaden the network. And surprisingly or not, I had this intuition that there are many people worldwide working on these topics, and I'm very happy to see how this program took form. I think this will be a very interesting and enriching encounter. So just to let you know that this workshop and my project also is being hosted by Professor Liliana Feierstein's chair in Transcultural Jewish History at the Humboldt University of Berlin. And that we will have a 2 days workshop, today and tomorrow. And I just would like to remind you which panels we have for today. So let me look at the program. Today we have a keynote starting in 14 minutes with Professor Cyril Aslanov. Then we will have a short break and the first panel on Yiddish translations and post-vernacularity. After a second break, we have a panel on translating from and into Hebrew in the 20th century. We will have a break of 1 hour, and then a third panel on methodology and technology applied. After a short pause, we will have the last panel of the day on translating from and into Judeo-Spanish. Tomorrow we will start at 9:30. I would like to let you know from the technical point of view, we would like to ask you, please do not interrupt the speakers. Each of us has only 15 minutes to talk, so it's not much time, but we do have time for debate and exchange, which is very important for this workshop. So I really enthusiastically call you to exchange with your colleagues and open debates and questions. But please do respect the time of the speakers. So if you have questions, I think the best way to organize is to write on the chat that you have a question. So we will make a list and you will be able to talk in the order of the list. And if you do not want to talk personally, you can just write your question on the chat. For anything you need, please, you can write me on the chat or Maia Avruj, who will be all the time attending and ready to answer your questions. Maia, do you think I am forgetting something? No, okay. So this was a short introduction. We will wait for our keynote to arrive, so we can pause the recording, Maia, and we will start when Professor Cyril Aslanov arrives in a couple of minutes.
Correct?
Yeah, I will present you first, okay, for the people who do not know you.
Of course.
Okay. Maia, you can restart recording. So, Professor Cyril Aslanov es exalumno de la École Nationale Supérieure, es profesor de lingüística en Aix-Marseille Université. Desde el 2006 es miembro de la Academia de la Lengua Hebrea en Jerusalén. Ha publicado más de 220 artículos y 9 libros. Estos son Pour comprendre la Bible, la leçon d'André Chouraki en 1999. Le provençal des Juifs et l'hébreu en Provence, le dictionnaire Charchot à Kesef de Joseph Caspi en 2001. Evidence of Francophony in Medieval Levant, Decipherment and Interpretation of MS in 2006. Le français levantais jadis et naguère, à la recherche d'une langue perdue, a book that I like very much in 2006. Parlant grec moderne in 2008, Sociolingüística de las lenguas judías in 2011, a very important book for all of us. A traduction como manipulation in 2015, New Perspectives on the Sacred and the Secular in Old French and Old Provençal Poetry in 2019, and I think the last one, Applying Contact Linguistics to Indo-European Comparative Linguistics in 2024. Cyril has the keynote, the translation into Jewish languages and its impact upon them. Professor Cyril Aslanov, you are invited to start.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for this kind words of presentation and for your compliment about my fourth book on the French Levantine French, which I, by the way, will use in my lecture. So before I start to discuss the main points of my lecture that will be dedicated to Yiddish, Judeo-Spanish, and Judeo-Arabic, I would like to tell you about the history of my research. I had a preconception, maybe a wrong preconception, according to which the impact of the source language is expected to leave a very strong trace in the structures and in the lexicon of the target language of the target text. And driven by this preconception, I wanted to illustrate it on the base of a very important translation made by the young Yitzchok Bashevis Zinger in 1930 actually, yeah, 1930, in Warsaw, the translation of Thomas Mann's Zauberberg, the Magic Mountain. And I expected to find a huge impact of Thomas Mann's German on Bashevis's Yiddish. And I was very disappointed because it was quite the contrary. It is as if the young Bashevis made all possible efforts in order to avoid to cleave on the German source language of Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain, translated as Der Zauberberg in Bashevis' translation. I will discuss this case study as a very important point. The more the language is close, the more the target language is close to the source language, the more there is a strong will on behalf of the translator to be remote from the target language in a process of what the Germans call Sprachaufstand, the linguistic upheaval, the linguistic insurrection, the linguistic revolt. Although Warsaw Jews in the pre-war period were quite attracted to German as a cultural language. This was, by the way, as a reaction against Russian. You will remember that before 1918, Warsaw was part of the Russian Empire, and there was a common front against Russian on behalf of the Polish Gentiles and the Polish Jews in the region of Warsaw, in Congress Poland, in central Poland. So basically, the cultivated Warsaw Jews, the emancipated Warsaw Jews, had kind of tropism, a kind of infatuation in favor of German. And this can, by the way, explain why the young Bolsheviks choose such magnificent example of German belletristic as a text to be translated into Yiddish. By the way, he also translated Stefan Zweig and other texts, not necessarily German, but through the German intermediary. He translated also Knut Hamsun, the Norwegian novelist Knut Hamsun, twice, two of the books from German, through the German mediation, and another one through the Hebrew mediation. And this leads me to the main point. Bashevis's translation of the Magic Mountain is a very strongly Hebraicized blend of Yiddish, for a reason that I will explain right now. In the sociolinguistic hierarchy, the Hebraicized blend of Yiddish is the most distinguished one, for the reason that is called the aristocracy of knowledge in the East European Jewry. The more a person is close to the religious sources in Loshen Kodesh, in the sacred language, which is, by the way, not only Hebrew but also Aramaic, the more he is respected. And Bashevis, although he departed from the traditional way of life of his father's house, he still was very close to the conception that the strong Hebraicized blend of Yiddish is the most respected one. And as a matter of fact, he made with this very Hebraicized blend of Yiddish what Agnon made with Hebrew as a sacred language of this, as the language, the sources, especially the rabbinic sources in the case of Agnon. He secularized this very strongly Hebraicized blend of Yiddish in the way Agnon secularized the typical formulas of rabbinic Hebrew in order to tell stories that were not necessarily connected with sacredness or sanctity. Here, sort of paradoxically secularized a very religious blend of Yiddish. And I will give you an example of this choice of a very Hebraicized, very strongly Hebraicized blend of Yiddish in order to translate the extremely refined blend of German used by Thomas Mann, as if there were an equivalence between Thomas Mann's extremely high connotated German and the extremely Hebraicized blend of Yiddish. And here maybe I will ask your help, Cynthia, in order to share the screen with the draft that will be used as a kind of handout. I avoid using PowerPoint because I think it is a kind of castration, because it constrains to limit the exposition to one slide, and I'm against fragmentation of knowledge through the use of PowerPoint. Thank you very much. Can you get a little bit down? Because I have here an example taken from a very strange text, an extract of the Mountain Magic. Okay, here is the original. That paradoxically, if we speak about translation, we have to think that some translations are not translations. Thomas Mann pretends that this text was translated from Polish. This is obviously a fiction, because the text was written directly by Thomas Mann in German. It is a very juridical blend of German, something that has a taste of bureaucratic Austro-Hungarian German before World War I. Da außerdem eine gerichtliche Bestrafung des Herrn Japol, die Beleidigung durch die Herr Kasimir Japol, den Namen und das Haus des Herrn Stanisław von Sultawski und seiner Gemahlin Jadwiga in verleumderischer Weise zu schänden versuchte, nicht zu sühnen vermochte. And I will stop here because this is what interests me. The translation of this quite long sentence into Yiddish. If you noted, the endless juridical sentence ends with the Konjunktiv 2, Präterit Konjunktiv 2, vermöchte, which is the past of the subjunctive, the conjunctive past of Vermögen, to be able to be valid, which contains a very problematic shibboleth from the point of view of Yiddish. As you know, Yiddish lost the subjunctive mood, the conjunctive mood. It has only I would say, rests of the with in the subjunctive form volt, okay? And this is the way in which Bashevis, the young Bashevis, he was by that time he was 30 years he was 30 years old, translated this pseudo translation. It is presented as a translation from Polish, of course it is not, into Yiddish. A gerechtliche Straf auf Kazimierz Japol is trotzdem nicht bechoyech, ob zwischen die Beleidigung, durch welche Kazimierz Japol hat gewollt machen zu Schand dem Namen und die Familie von Herr Stanisław von Żuławski und sein Frau Jadwiga. Here there is a very strange thing. I will start with the shibboleth, the linguistic shibboleth. Instead of translating the subjunctive, which is quite difficult to translate, the only way to translate this shibboleth would have been to use the auxiliary volt, okay? But it was avoided by the young Bashevis, who used only a kind of incise, a kind of periphrasis, is nicht bechoyach, with an incise chutztem, which is the translation of außerdem. So in the German original, you see außerdem, which is an adverb, a phrase, a sentence adverb, and you see the use of vermöchte at the very end of the paragraph. And here we see that außerdem is translated by the incise chutztem, which is a strong Hebraism, chutz, and vermöchte is translated by the periphrasis is bechoyer, is nicht bechoyer. Nicht vermöchte, nicht zu sühnen vermöchte, is nicht bechoyer. With dropping of sühnen, to expiate. In this translation, we see a very strong freedom taken by Bashevis with respect to the German original. As a matter of fact, Bashevis took seriously the pretension, the claim that this paragraph in the German original was translated into Polish, from Polish, because he repolonized the names of the victims of the parts in this scandal, the Beleidigung, the humiliation. Kazimierz Japol in German has been repolonized as Kazimierz Japol. Actually, the Yiddish writing does not allow to recognize that the L is a velar L, but whoever is familiar with the pronunciation of L in Yiddish knows that in certain positions, L is by any automatically realized as a velar L. So Kazimierz Japol as a re-polonization of Herr Kazimierz Japol. I think that the double L in German is an attempt to represent the velarized value of the W of Japol in Polish. And also the victim of Kazimierz Japol's misdeed, Stanisław von Żuławski. It has been translated by Zuławski, and here I think that Bashevis behaved as a kind of linguistic archaeologist. He understood that the use of a T in von Zutawski in Mann's original is wrong. Probably Thomas Mann saw the barred L of Polish and wrongly associated it with a T. But with his extremely precise perception of the interplay between the languages, Bashevis re-established the L value, the W value, that Mann probably misinterpreted as a T. The bird L as the symbol of the valorized L in Polish was re-established in Bashevis's translation of this word in of this name in Yiddish. By the way, Bashevis is not completely immune from Deutschmerismen, the use of Germanism in literary Yiddish. But in this, he is not isolated. A lot of Eastern European Jews between the wars avoided the use of mishpoche, family, in order to translate family or familie, because mishpoche had a wrong connotation of an invading family with a lot of children. If you say family, it sounds more respectable. And speaking of the family of a Polish aristocrat, Stanisław von Zuławski, it was not done to translate, it was not convenient to translate familie by mishpoche, and this is the reason why he preferred the noble Deutschmerism familie, which was, by the way, the same strategy when he chose the title Die Familie Muschkat in one of his most famous novels published in 1950 in New York. By the way, 2 years after the completion of this milestone translation from German to a very strongly Hebraicized blend of Yiddish, Bashevis published his first novel, The Sultan in Gorai. And if you read The Sultan in Gorai, of course, in the Yiddish original, you see that it is not only a very strongly Hebraicized blend of Yiddish, it is even sometimes, not sometimes, very often, a parody of the specific style of the Polish rabbis in the 17th, 18th, and even 19th century, with not only Hebrew loan words within the Yiddish, but whole linguistic islands of Hebrew, the discursive chain of the Yiddish. So this is an exemplification of the contrary of what I wanted to prove. In order to translate German, Bashevis takes a huge distance from German and from the possible Deutschmerismen, the Germanism in modern standard Yiddish, resorting to the rabbinic Hebraicized blend of Yiddish in an attempt to ironically secularize this blend of Yiddish that was extremely associated with the world of religion, according to a strategy that he shares with Agnon, the paradoxical secularization of the sacred tongue, which is the sacred tongue in as a whole by Agnon, and the very important Hebrew component in Bashevis's imitation of rabbinic Yiddish, the rabbinic Yiddish of the responsa, for example, Shelot Tshuvot. Okay, so I'll go further in my demonstration, but with something that is maybe, can you go a little bit down, Cynthia? Thank you very much. Yes, a little bit down. With your permission, I will leave the world of Yiddish and of Bashevis and of Warsaw, pre-war Warsaw, and I will shift to another place, to another Jewish language, which is Judeo-Spanish. I don't call it Ladino, although in one of the instances, one of the examples I brought, it could be considered Ladino stricto sensu, in the sense that it is really a rabbinic blend of Judeo-Spanish. So let me produce two pieces of translation, or more exactly, one translation and one other, the forward to a translation. First example I choose is a very interesting translation of Robinson Crusoe by a Jerusalemetan Sephardic Jew called Ben-Zion Tarragan, who was born in 1870 and who passed away in 1953. So he is one remarkable specimen of this old Yishuv Sephardic people, who were, by the way, the most distinguished Jews in Ottoman and even mandatory Jerusalem. And in his translation of Robinson Crusoe, which is the actually not the first translation of this work in Judeo-Spanish, this is the third and fourth translation, Ben-Zion Tarragan didn't use the English original of Robinson Crusoe. He used an Haskalah Hebrew translation published in Vilna I don't remember exactly the date, but it is part of the Russian Jewish Haskalah. It was not a real translation. It was a contracted translation, an abbreviated translation of the English original, maybe through a German intermediary. You never know with Haskalah people. They were not so fluent in English. They were more fluent in German. That's why some of their translation that are presented as translated from English are actually translated from German or from Russian. Never mind. What is important here is that Ben-Zion Tarragan used the Hebrew as the base of his translation of Robinson Crusoe into Judeo-Spanish, and this might explain the very strongly Hebraicized blend of Judeo-Spanish he uses. Actually, when we are speaking of Judeo-Spanish, the amount of Hebraicization is not the same as in the case of Yiddish. Eastern European Yiddish is by far more Hebraicized in its highest registers than Judeo-Spanish. But here, whether the mediation of Haskalah Hebrew was responsible for this Hebraicization, relative Hebraicization of the Judeo-Spanish, or this Hebraicization may be explained by the fact that this old Yeshuv Sephardic Jew was still attached to the old register of rabbinical Ladino, the result is quite obvious. Something that sounds very familiar to whoever read the Ladino of the rabbis before the strong cultural revolution that brought to the fore other registers of Judeo-Spanish. So this is the translation of the Hebrew mediation of Robinson Crusoe with something that is tantamount to a Judaization of the text, because in the original, the English original, Robinson Crusoe remembers the Sundays and the Christian holidays. Here, Sunday is replaced by Shabbat, and the holiday is replaced by the holiday par excellence, Pesach, Passover. Busqué un árbol y empecé a cavacar sobre él. En 30 de septiembre 1659 entró Robinson en la dita isla y abajo cavacaba cada tarde, día por día, nombre del día de la semana y el día de Shabbat y el día del primo de mes con letras grandes. En esta regla podía saber la cuenta de los días en regla y holgaba en el día que holgan en la gente poblada y pascuaba junto con ellos en sus Pascuas. I took this quotation from an excellent article by a Polish young researcher, Kacprzak, who studied the various translations of Robinson Crusoe into Judeo-Spanish. I want to draw the attention to the end of this paragraph. Pascuava junto con ellos en sus Pascuas, with the figura etymologica that consists in using the word pascuar, a literal translation of ifsach, in the famous invitation of the Passover Agada, kol di chpin yete veyochal, kol di tzrich yete veyifsach. Yifsach, the action of celebrating Passover. So this verb pascuar is a very old calc translation of pasach, ifsach, the act of celebrating Passover, with a complementizer, a direct complementizer, which is Pascuas, a translation of Pesach, according to an old usance that goes back to pre-expulsion Spain, whereby in some documents used in the interface with the Christian world, Pesach was translated as Pascua, in spite of the problematic avoidance of Christian terminology in the specifically Jewish register of pre-expulsion Castilian. So this is the first example, and we see that here my hypothesis of the impacts left by the source language on the target language is not so wrong, because we have to consider the Hebrew mediation of this translation of Robinson Crusoe into Judeo-Spanish as the source language. And the source language left a deep impact in this very, I would say that the formulation is very Hebrew in this extract, this place of Benzion Paragan's translation. Now let me switch to another example, which belongs to another generation of translators. Other generation, because the translation of Taragan, the first draft of the translation, published in Jerusalem in 1897, is probably the most authentic one. I shift now to another generation in the sense that the translation I will to discuss was published in Salonic in 1929 by the publicist and translator Alberto Moljo. And in his translation of another English book, by the way, The King of Schnorrers by Israel Zangwill, he apparently used the mediation of a French translation of The King of Schnorrers made in 1920 by Georges Dreyfus in Paris. This translation is strongly Gallicized. It corresponds to the blend of Judeo-Spanish that is known in Judeo-Spanish as enfranqueado. Enfranqueado in the sense that it is not only written with Latin letters, it is also very, very strongly influenced by French syntaxes, French lexicon, and even French phonetics. It is the last stop before the fully integration of Sephardic Jews in Salonic and to a certain extent also in Istanbul to French. There is a kind of gradation of gradual continuum from the traditional blends of Judeo-Spanish, be it the rabbinical Ladino, strongly Hebraicized, or the strongly Turkified popular Ladino, to a more prestigious blend of Ladino that was enfranqueado, that was strongly Gallicized. And the next step is the full adoption of French, not necessarily the French of Paris, but at least the Levantine French in use in Istanbul and in Salonic by the Jews and other minorities of the Ottoman or post-Ottoman space. So afterwards, after this shift from Gallicized Judeo-Spanish to Levantine French, the next step is, of course, the adoption of Standard French, which was not so uncommon in the post-Ottoman space because many ex-alumni of the educational network Alliance Israélite Universelle, KIAH, were more puristic in their use of French than the French themselves. And they became teachers in the same network. The best pupils of the network served as the propagators of the best blend of French to in other places. Sometimes the Bulgarian Jews found themselves in Morocco, or Salonician Jews found themselves in Aleppo, like the family of the famous French linguist Émile Benveniste, who was of Salonician Jewish background on the side of his father, and who was born in Aleppo because his father was appointed teacher of French in the school of the Alliance Israélite Universelle in Aleppo. So this Gallicized blend of Judeo-Spanish is very strongly impacted by the syntax of French, by the lexicon of French, and even by the phonetic, or maybe by the orthography, the spelling, but it is difficult to judge because actually the question of accent is problematic when we don't have the record in 1929. We have records, recent records, but from people that have been influenced by other linguistic surroundings. What would be interesting is to hear Salonician Jew in 1929. In absence of records from Salonician Jews in 1929, there are only maybe the records of the Romancero, which is not made in a Gallicized blend of Judeo-Spanish, but in a traditional one. So we have to hold on the spelling. And let me read aloud the foreword written by Alberto Moljo to his translation of the King of Schnorrers through the mediation of the French translation by Georges Dreyfus. It is as if the strong pressure of the source language, not the real source language, but the relay language, idioma relevo, in the process of the transposition of the King of Schnorrers into Judeo-Spanish, the strong impact of the relay language French was propagated, was communicated even to the foreword that was allegedly written in Judeo-Spanish in the original. Let us see how the influence of the source language of the King of Schnorrers and also of another language that seems to have played a very significant role in Albert Moljo's linguistic background, the Italian one. Maybe because Alberto Moljo was an ex-pupil of the Regia Scuola of Salonic, where that was highly held in high esteem by the Salonician Jews. So we see in this paragraph coexistence of strong Gallicisms and strong Italianisms. I noted in yellow the Gallicism and in green the Italianisms. Otorgamos que no es sin hesitación que asumimos el traslado de una de las mayores obras del escritor judío de Inglaterra, Israel Zangwill. You can recognize here the famous cleft sentence construction of French. Es sin hesitación que, no es sin hesitación que, a typical transposition of ce n'est pas sans hésitation que. Nos rendemos cuento. Also a calc translation of nous nous rendons compte, que no es al tanto facile. This is an Italianism, of course, que el traslado de un qualunque romanzo de aventuras, que no es al tanto facile que el traslado. Here we see another example, by the way, of the cleft construction. Es al tanto facile que. Ce n'est pas aussi facile que le que. El traslado de qualunque, an adaptation of the indefinite determiner of Italian qualunque. Romanzo, also an Italianism. De aventuras. You can see here the transposition of aventure with the nasal en of French that was reproduced as is a copy of the en of the French aventure. Es mucho difícil with another Italianism. Por contra, calc translation of par contre, de trasladar, the use of the de is also a Gallicism because either in Italian or in Spanish, you are not constrained to use de as a way of introducing the infinitive after periphrasis as es difícil, no es difícil, è difficile, no è difficile. En qualunque lingua also an Italianism, straniera. Qualunque lingua straniera, a calc adaptation of qualunque lingua straniera. La obra de un romanciero, also a Gallicism, an adaptation of superficial adaptation of romancier. The talent, the word talent used as it is. El cual pinta con tantas colores. Here we have the problem of some Gallicism that could be considered also as archaisms, all the Castilian archaisms, like la mar and instead of el mar, or la color and instead of el color. We see here a convergence between the old layer of Old Castilian in Judeo-Spanish and the new wave of influence exerted by French. La vida de sus héroes y los hace con el justo escogimiento de los verbos, de los cualificativos y de las frases. The use of phrases, it's also a Gallicism. Phrase has been reinterpreted according to the French with a stronger marking of the feminine in the same way that nacionala has been used instead of the epicene nacional, or generala instead of the epicene general. Okay? Vivos claros, consecuentes con sí mismo, with the use of the singular mismo instead of the plural that was expected in Judeo-Spanish. So we see here a strong impact of the French, not only on the translation, but also on the foreword of the translation, which is typical of this generation of the last decade, the last decade before the last 2 decades before the extermination of the Salonician Jews by the Germans. So we see here a process of swallowing of Judeo-Spanish by French according to a dynamics that has been described by Jaime Vidal-Cefija, who called this specific blend of enfranqueado Judeo-Spanish judeo-frañol, which is a portmanteau word that combines Judeo-Spanish and Français, judeo-frañol. So here, the case of Judeo-Spanish could give reason to the intuition that sometimes the source language, be it the mediation or be it the real source language, exerts a deep impact not only on the lexicon, but also on the syntax, as we have seen through the examples of the cleft sentence, no es sin hesitación que asumimos el traslado, or the use of a superfluous de and es mucho difícil por contra de trasladar, en lugar and instead of es mucho difícil trasladar. So let's go further, but before I go further, I will say something about the situation right now. There are very few original texts written in Judeo-Spanish nowadays. But one of the most remarkable writers of Judeo-Spanish in our days is an ex-Yugoslavian Bosnian Jew, Israeli now, called Eliezer Papo. And it is very strange that in Eliezer Papo's Judeo-Spanish that strives to be very authentic, we can find, I don't know if it is on purpose or not, but we can find Gallicisms because the blend of Judeo-Spanish he uses is sometimes influenced by the Stambuli Judeo-Spanish that was strongly Gallicized, maybe not so strongly as the Salonician one, but quite enough. So in the moment Eliezer Papo takes the pen in order to write something original in Judeo-Spanish, he is somehow inhabited by the French influence, because this impact was not an impact, a circumstantial impact that vanished after the publication of the translation from French. As once it was integrated in text published in the Judeo-Spanish publication world, it remained, and that's why original writers in Judeo-Spanish sometimes cannot avoid the Gallicisms that were somehow integrated into modern Judeo-Spanish through the huge publicistic activity by translators who published in newspapers or as independent books, the translations from French or through French. And now let's speak briefly on another case, this case of Judeo-Arabic. Judeo-Arabic is not one unique language. Not only has it a very long history, it has also a lot of dialectal diversification, not necessarily on the base of a common stem, a common Judeo-Arabic stem, but as a variation of local Arabic dialects. And we see here, I used an example that was mentioned by Joseph Chetrit, the world known specialist of Judeo-Arabic, not only of Moroccan Judeo-Arabic, but of every blend of Judeo-Arabic. Joseph Chetrit found a very interesting text that could maybe shed a new light on the process of Francization, of Gallicization of Algerian Jews 22 years after the Crémieux decree that transformed collectively all the Algerian Jews into French citizens. This a text written in Judeo-Arabic with Hebrew letters, of course, by Algerian Jews in a provincial town called Tenyet al-Had, southwest of the capital Algiers. And this text is very interesting from a lot of vantage points. First, it shows that the naturalization of Algerian Jews was not automatically followed by a linguistic Gallicization, Francization of them. Second, the blend of Judeo-Arabic used by those Algerian Jews was strongly Francized on a lexical and phraseological base, because probably what we see here in the photo is the translation of a telegram, the journalistic telegram. So let us recognize the French impact on this blend of Algerian Judeo-Arabic at the end of its use. It is, by the way, very interesting that in the capital, Algiers, in 1912, Judeo-Arabic was not so in use because it was the capital. But 300 kilometers southwest of Algiers, it probably lasted more time. And anyway, this text is dated to 1892. من تانية الحادة راهم يعلمونا this is perfectly Arabic. وعين في 25 لشقار آلي جاز جاء and here begins the impact of French. L'inspecteur وفيزيتار la scolate. This is a very interesting word because it's not a Gallicism, it is an Hispanism of Algerian Judeo-Spanish that comes back to the very old period when the Aragonese Jews came to Algiers in 1321 as the result of the riots, anti-Jewish riots of the Crown of Aragon. So this is apparently French, but it is not French. But l'inspecteur and visitor is probably more French than Spanish. وأغبو ياسر ومشى لسكولا دي البنات وقعدوا هناك or هناك هوا مسيو le maire sir maire والأجوان دي maire the assistant of the mayor ومسيو دومين و غزولهم جزاما للبنات ورحبوا زوج بنات ديال يهود شتي two girls from the Jews وبنت واحدة رومية and one European girl. Certificate de cours, which is the French locution certificat de cours. L'examen del benat of the girls. The del is apparently the del Arabic del. ليهود Mademoiselle Sultana de Moshe Adhan. Mademoiselle Sultana, fille de Moïse Dahan. Aïcha de Makhlouf. Aïcha, daughter of Makhlouf. Ibn Yishu, Ben Yishu. Délégué du consistoire. Délégué du consistoire. The envoy of the consistorium. وفرحوا بهم يسد. So you see here a blend of transcribed French integrated into the discursive chain of the Algerian Judeo-Arabic on the verge of its extinction. It is the last step before its replacement by French as a result of what is described in this document, the scholarly, the educative successes and progresses of the young Algerian Jews in the generation that was not a generation that received the French citizenship in 1870. It was the generation that followed the generation of the naturalized Jews, And those French Algerian Jews were extremely fluent in French because they understood that the French educational network, the Republican network, was a trampoline for a better life in the frame of colonial Algeria. By the way, if we consider the situations studied by Chitrit, we see that this very important scholar found counter examples of this small that in Tunisia, a place that was colonized relatively late by the French colonizer, because Tunisia became French only in 1881, at a time when the Italian influence was far stronger in Tunisia than the French one. Anyway, even after the takeover of Tunisia by the French colonizer, the local Jews tried to cleave to a conception of what is called in Arabic, Arabiya, the pure Arabic. And they created what Chitrit calls New Middle Arabic. Middle Arabic being the register where Judeo-Arabic is located, not the highest Arabic, because highest Arabic is a prerogative of someone who is not nourished by day-by-day use of Quran, not the low register, which is the spoken dialect, but an honorable compromise between the lowest straight of the Arabic diglossia and the highest straight, what he called the New Middle Arabic, with an attempt to adopt occasionally elegances from the highest register of Arabic in order to express a will to converge towards the educated Muslim population of colonial Tunisia. As for Morocco, the situation was quite similar to the Algerian one, but with one exception, with one difference. French was not at stake, was not involved in the process of writing texts that were translated from journalistic telegrams. The reference languages were more Spanish and Hebrew, of course, because Moroccan Jews were extremely learned in the traditional educational lore, and their Hebrew was far higher than the Hebrew of the Algerian or the Tunisian Jews. So through these examples taken from Bashevis's translation of Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain into Yiddish, of Ben-Zion Taragan's translation of Robinson Crusoe through an Hebrew mediation, of Alberto Molcho's translation of the Kings of Schnorrers through a French mediation, and through this strange translation of a journalistic telegram, originally phrased in French and partially translated into Judeo-Arabic, we see that the impact is generally very strong as far as Judeo-Spanish and Judeo-Arabic is concerned. Not all kind of Judeo-Arabic, of course, this particular blend of Algerian Judeo-Arabic, whereas Yiddish was sufficiently strong in his in its Sitz im Leben in Eastern Europe to avoid this kind of swallowing by other languages. But the paradox is that in order to avoid to be swallowed by the German original, Bashevis used a very, very strongly Hebraicized blend of Yiddish, which is maybe another way of being swallowed by another language than the language apparently used. So I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Aslanov. I think we would have so many questions, but our time is scheduled already to restart in 8 minutes. So what I propose, we will try to keep our schedule as it is, and we will start the first panel in 8 minutes. But if you wish, those who want, you can stay during the pause and ask questions to Professor Aslanov, if you agree, of course. So we can stop the recording, Maia, but you are free to talk with the Professor Aslanov.